Hey everybody, it is week 8 and we're talking about pronouns this week. So I use male pronouns, so he, his, and him. Um, and this isn't necessarily as much of a problem now as it was when I first started my transition, but when I started my transition, as masculine as I thought I looked, um, my pronoun choice wasn't necessarily seen by everybody else in the world. So I could go to dinner and I was actually feeling pretty good about myself and how I felt like I was presenting. Excuse me. And then, we'd go to a restaurant and, um, they would address me with female pronouns. And I have to say, like, it's one of those things, like, I personally, at the time, just wasn't as comfortable addressing or correcting. And part of it was because I felt like, well, maybe there was something to it. They saw me a certain way. I wasn't quite masculine enough. Um, all of the above. And I feel like it's one of those things that every time that happened, really, as little as it seems, very simple, one word, very short word, um, always felt like it set me back a little bit. So, I'd wake up one morning and I'd be feeling really great because, I don't know, I noticed a hair on my chin. I'd go to dinner that night and somebody would say, miss or ma'am, and then, it pretty much erased any progress that I had felt like I had made. Which I feel like is why pronouns and getting pronouns correct with trans people is so important and so um, it can so easily kind of, get messed up. Especially if you're in situations where people are assuming your pronouns and your gender identity and it's not how you identify. Um, I think like now it's a little different for me because I I hate to use the word, but I pass generally, right, in day-to-day situations, except for maybe about once every couple months, randomly, somebody will use female pronouns with me, like if I'm at dinner, and I don't know why. I don't know if they're just not really paying attention, um, and so they just, are saying the first person they saw, they're going with that pronoun set for the whole group. I have no idea. But, it happens here and there. It has a tendency to affect me a little bit less now than it used to. But it still kind of is like a little bit of a reminder, and gets me a little bit kind of internalizing a lot of stuff about maybe how I'm looking or dressing or talking. Um, and it's things that, I don't know if that'll happen for the rest of my life. I don't know if, I'm always going to wonder in the back of my head if it's really because they see me as female or if it's, just random coincidence. You know, Messing up a pronoun on someone who's cisgender, I feel like can be funny sometimes, right? Like people joke about it. It's something people laugh about. And it it for me was very hard, anytime somebody messed up my pronoun. Um, I am fortunate enough to have, quite a few people in my life that are supportive of my transition and, respectful of kind of using the pronouns that I identify with. But I'm not always with those people. The only one I'm really usually with is my mom and my parents, or my parents in general, and then my partner, Mary. Um, but it's I'm not usually in a big group of people, and my pronouns get messed up. Um, and I don't have necessarily like a big group of people there to back me up. Um, it's happened a couple times, like at a bar with friends, and they're getting drunk, and then I think they just forget because they're reverting back to whatever they remember about me, and it can be awkward. Um, to be honest, I feel like too, and this may start me on a whole nother tangent, but I'll try and keep it directed around pronouns. Um, it can be like a safety issue too, I feel like, a little bit. Like, I don't want to get dramatic or make it anything it's not, but if you're in a public place or in somewhere, that maybe isn't as open to trans people or even LGBT people in general, um, it it can, depending on the person and where they're at in their transition, could put them in a very awkward place. Earlier in my transition, like prior to top surgery, when I had just started T, my voice was still relatively high. Like even with binding, you could still kind of see my chest wasn't quite as flat as maybe the next guy's. And if I was out somewhere, and going into a bathroom, I was already nervous. But if somebody had already that night said, miss or ma'am, I feel like it just puts me in a really weird place. It put me in kind of a weird state of mind too, where maybe like I'm giving off the vibes that there's something weird about me, and people pick up on that stuff. Whether or not they're picking up the right thing is totally random, but people can sense like, oh, why are you kind of fidgety? You're kind of weird, and unfortunately, people get spooked sometimes about what they think, and bad things happen. Um, as for me, like I'm a pretty happy-go-lucky person now, but I have to admit, like when people messed up my pronouns, as patient as I can be, those were times that were tough. Not necessarily, I'm not talking about my family, but like, if I was out and about, it was always a constant reminder, always kind of hovering above my shoulder and back of my head, about who I was and the body that I have, and at some point, kind of what little I can do beyond taking, testosterone and having top surgery and whatever, to make people see that. And, as time's gone on, thankfully, like a lot of those, I think, worries and the little voice in the back of my head that tells me maybe I'm not quite man enough have kind of gone away. And especially as I've come to understand really what I consider to be the man that I want to be, and what that looks like, I think I'm starting to become more okay with, and comfortable with, how people see me. But there was a time where those just like switching, the pronouns, adding one little letter to he, like threw me for a whirl, and it would really throw me in kind of a weird space for a little, probably like a week. I would just be kind of in a weird state of mind, constantly like trying to figure out and navigate better, and so that people would see me as male. Um, but yeah, I've ranted long enough for this one. I'm not sure if I even got it all. Um, but pronouns, they seem so simple and small, but the bottom line is that they're really important to try like your hardest to get correct, or ask if you're unsure, because it really is one of those things that'll just set, it could set somebody off. It could do whatever. For me, that's what it was. It was kind of a trigger for me, and a constant reminder of my transition, and maybe how far I had to go at the time. So, and regardless, it's just respectful, right, to use and address people the way they want to be addressed. But yeah, they seem so small and simple, but it's really a big deal. So, hope everybody's having a good week. I have successfully posted on the right day. So I will see you all in a couple weeks.